My name is Madison. I'm 39 years old. I recently got an electric blanket to save on electricity bills. It's making it harder for me to get out of my bed in the morning. The other day, I wasn't planning on snoozing, but I fell back asleep and was almost late for work. Beware of electric blankets. What? I'm just being spoiled? I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, I want to tell you about when I was married to a spoiled brat. I'm sure you will all be annoyed with him too. It was 10 years ago. I had just gotten engaged to Daniel, a man I met on a dating app. To be frank, I was getting impatient seeing my friends get married one after another. Then I found my husband at last. I was overjoyed and had my head in clouds thinking I was chosen by a good man too. However, there was an instant that snapped me back to reality. It was when I went to meet Daniel's mom, Sarah, for the first time. He was the only child raised by a single mother. I was told in advance by him that she loved him so much, but it turned out to be more than I had expected. I was brought to her house and was totally stunned by what she said even before I could finish introducing myself. You chose a woman who is nothing like me. She looked me up and down. She expected her son to marry a woman who looked just like her. I didn't think it was particularly odd. Some mothers tell their daughters to find a good husband like their father. What left a bad taste in my mouth was the way she looked at me and spoke to me. Her gaze and the tone of her voice made me think of a jealous girlfriend. Madison is a smart woman who can take a step back and look at things from a different perspective, just like you, Mom. Daniel tried to smooth things out, but his comment only added more discomfort to me. I didn't feel like he was praising me at all, even though that was supposed to be praise. In response to him, "Oh, really?" Sarah smiled and seemed to be pleased, which made me even more uncomfortable. After he explained that she and I were actually similar, her attitude toward me softened. "I'm glad to hear that you're just like me." She gave me a satisfactory smile. I know people sometimes unconsciously choose a partner who looks like their parents. I have a friend just like that too, but Daniel sounded like he chose me because I resembled his mom. In truth, we were nothing like each other. I had never thought of myself as someone who could look at things from a different perspective. Instead, I was the type of person people around me normally commented to be quite direct. I couldn't fathom what made him say such a thing. He was probably just trying to make his mom happy. I questioned whether it was a good idea to marry a guy who had to kiss his mom's butt. Although such a doubt came up in my mind, I denied myself that it was nothing. It was my long-awaited marriage after all. As the wedding plan progressed, I began to forget the discomfort I had felt upon meeting Sarah. At that time, I was running at full power trying to grasp the happiness in front of me at any cost. Then again, a problem arose. Daniel mentioned that he would send half of his salary to Sarah after we got married. He was not well paid. We were just talking that we both had to work to make ends meet. I also wanted to save money for our baby in the future. Of course, I didn't think he should neglect his mom or anything like that, but I told him it was too much for us to support her. She raised me single-handedly, and we'll be all alone at home. I think she deserves that much." He started weeping to my surprise. I was taken aback to see him react in such a way. I wondered if our marriage was going to be okay, but again, I tried to tell myself that he was a sensible person with strong ties with his mother, coming from a single-parent family. It was right before our wedding, so I also had a strong feeling of responsibility to understand him. I honestly had no idea how he felt, but I assumed that was the way it was, and I needed to accept him as he was. That was exactly what people say, love is blind. Looking back on it now, I realize how stupid I was. We talked about sending money on many occasions, and I told him not to do it every time. In the end, I was forced to agree to 1/3 of his salary instead of half. Many things weren't settled, yet the wedding day was getting closer and closer. I did think about canceling it at one point. I just couldn't make up my mind when I thought about the cancellation fee, and settled on having more discussions after the wedding. There were also issues with the wedding planning. For some reason, Sarah kept interfering with us and told us what to wear and how the event should progress. Daniel listened to her every word, so the fall event had changed a lot. My requests for this and that were mostly replaced by her taste. It's normal for parents to advise their children to make their wedding day better, she told me. Daniel also said, "A wedding my mom plans will be an amazing one. She's always right." He was adamant about it. My parents divorced when I was very young, and I didn't even remember my dad's face. On top of that, my mom, who raised me, passed away when I was in college. I had no one to talk to about whether what Sarah was doing was normal or not. Needless to say, we ended up with a wedding painted in her colors. I felt as if I was just a surrogate bride for her and Daniel to get married. I thought her meddling was just momentary. Once we got married, it was gradually going to disappear. It was better than having to deal with an evil mother-in-law. I was still somewhat optimistic at that time. Although I was young and not familiar with the world, I was too naive. Now, 10 years later, I wish I had known more about the average family and had someone I could have consulted. My naivete was shattered once again about half a month after the wedding. "You're going on your honeymoon at the end of next month, right? I'm going to miss you. I want to go to Hawaii too." The last part of what Sarah spoke sounded like a spoiled child, which grossed me out. Then Daniel smiled in response. "Of course, Mom. I'll pay for your trip." I had no choice but to protest. "Wait a minute." "What? Is that a no?" Then Sarah pressured me. "Sure I can, right, Madison?" "Well, it's our honeymoon, not a family trip." When I apologetically explained to her, she became furious. "How dare you? Daniel is my son. I won't let you take him away from me just because you're married to him." "What are you talking about, Mom? I'll never leave you. Even if I'm married, you're still my number one." With tears in her eyes, she hugged him tightly, and he gently patted the back of her head. I realized that my marriage was no longer possible at that point. The scene was nothing but unpleasant. I was filled with distaste. The sight of them made me sick. Fortunately, He said he would pay for her share of the honeymoon. I decided to go along with him and knock him down later. I apologized to both of them and settled the situation. I kept an eagle eye on them until the day of the honeymoon. When it finally arrived, Sarah was smiling ear to ear. Even though we hadn't arrived in Hawaii yet, she showed up at the airport wearing a hibiscus necklace. I'm so excited. I haven't taken a trip with you in years. You have a lot of fun, Mom. Daniel was also all smiles while talking to his mom. Of course, if Madison wasn't here, it would have been a nice family trip. Don't worry, she's here to help you. You can ask her to carry your luggage. On top of saying whatever they wanted to say about me, they were holding each other's hands for some reason. I didn't think anything of it anymore. I just kept them out of my sight as much as possible. It was definitely not good for my mental health. I had an important business to take care of. I'm sorry to interrupt your excitement. Sarah, do you know how he came up with the money for your trip? What's the matter, Madison, out of the blue? I questioned her with a serious face, and she tensed up. What's going on, honey? Daniel was perplexed. Daniel, you're in debt and behind on all your shopping bills, aren't you? Both he and Sarah gasped at the same time in response to my question. I found a notice in the mailbox on my day off right after we got married. They said that you had neglected to pay the bills for several months. I flashed a few statements and demanded letters in front of him, who instantly became pale. I had a bad feeling about this, so I secretly looked into your bank account, and bingo! I found the name and history of the moneylender. He started trembling. Is it true, Daniel? Even Sarah turned pale and squeezed his arm. He remained silent. I looked at the credit card statements. It seems you've been buying a lot of brand-name goods. Well, that's... His agitation was apparent at that point. It's strange, isn't it? You don't have any brand-name goods, even though you have such a record. Well, it's a misunderstanding. At first, I thought you were giving them to Sarah as gifts, but I guess not. I looked into your phone too. It's locked. I wouldn't have figured it out if you hadn't set it to your birthday. You shouldn't have used such a no-brainer password. His face turned red when I pointed that out. You seem to be very fond of a former stripper named Foxy. And you've been paying her a lot of money even after she quit working. You're such a nice wallet for her. You even borrowed money to pay her. You seem to think she loves you. I quickly scattered printouts of her photo and the correspondences that I had found on his phone. He crawled onto the floor in a panic and gathered up those papers. Sarah yelled, "You've fallen for such a flamboyant woman?" She looked shocked, just as a girlfriend would be. "And you don't really care about your mom, do you?" "What?" Her eyes almost popped out of her head. "Stop it. Don't say any more." He shouted, but didn't seem to realize that his reaction proved I was right more than anything else. He was digging his own grave. I found inexcusable evidence in his chat with Foxy. If it was for her, he didn't care about getting into debt. He was getting married soon, and was having me keep working so he could give half of his salary to her, claiming it as an allowance to his mom. In the future, he will live with his mom and use her pension to pay off the debts. His mom loved him so much that he didn't realize that she was being deceived. He just needed to play the part, and everything would go as he planned. I honestly thought that he was a mommy's boy from the time I met Sarah, and recently I was convinced that he was. I finally understood after reading the chats. That guy used his mother as a tool to pay off his debts. He was a calm mommy's boy. He was attached to her only because he had a malicious plan to make the most use of her who spoiled him. It was an abominable action for a mother who raised her son single-handedly. He was a cruel man who was not worthy of working the same ground as us. When I revealed everything, "Oh, why did you?" he started crying. Sarah kept muttering that it was a lie to herself with a completely white face. I felt a little sorry for her, but then I thought she raised a spoiled brat who thought he could use her in the worst-case scenario. She was still giving him an allowance so that he would never leave her side. Even though he relied on her in an unbelievable way, she sowed the seeds. She got what she deserved in a way. Well, I am seriously worried about my marriage with an unfaithful man who is likely to be on the financial blacklist in the future. I want a divorce. There was no response from either of them when I declared that. I was disappointed, so I pressed harder. By the way, I erased the chat history, but I sent Foxy a message this morning while you were sleeping. I wrote, "I know I said a lot of things, but I love my mom and my wife." She replied that she didn't like you to begin with, and that she didn't care. I thought it might hurt your feelings, so I erased it. I'm nice, ain't I? Right, honey? When I said that much, Daniel finally looked at me. Give me back my Foxy. He started wailing. Seeing him like that, Sarah looked desperate as if she was stumped by him. I, on the other hand, couldn't hide my triumphant feeling, and had a big smile on my face. Well, then you two go on a trip, or do whatever. I'm going to charge you for my cancellation fee for this trip, and alimony for adultery. I remembered that there was one more picture I had failed to produce, and threw it to Daniel, who was still kneeling on the floor. It was of him kissing Foxy on the cheek. Sarah burst into tears at the sight of it, and he struggled to hide it. A woman quietly crying, and a man crawling on the ground in despair in the lobby of the airport. The audience watched from afar. I wondered what they thought had happened between the two. My short marriage was over just like that. My divorce was finalized not too long after I received my alimony. What was a little surprising was that Daniel asked me not to tell anyone he was a mommy's boy. For that, he agreed to pay a little higher than the market rate alimony. Apparently, it was too shameful for him to be known as a mommy's boy, even though it had been an act. I couldn't help but feel sorry for Sarah, but I guess it is what it is. She must have been totally knocked down by the truth. She no longer wanted to see his face and cut ties with her former beloved son. Once a woman has enough, it's fast to lose love. Daniel, on the other hand, who had unpaid debts and alimony payments, moved out of the apartment we once lived in. He tried to get help from Foxy, but as expected, he was turned away. He was holed up in an employee apartment for a short time, and to get out of his debt ASAP, he took on a second job. He was fired when his main job found out about it. He was such a moron as the company regulation clearly banned the side job. 10 years have passed since then, and he's still living in a shabby apartment with a communal bathroom, paying off his debts with the money he gets from his part-time jobs. As for me, I have remained single since then. Maybe because of what happened, I've lost my yearning for marriage. My romantic interest in men has completely faded away. If I were to choose between a man or a Wagyu steak, I'd be more excited about a steak. I am more interested in eating than romancing, even though I get indigestion easily nowadays. To be honest, I've since realized that it's easier to be alone. I have been enjoying my single life. It seems to suit my personality, maybe because of the no stress. My skin has also become clearer. I resigned from the company I was working for back then. I have now opened a lymphatic massage spa, which was my dream. It's a secret that the alimony I received from Daniel was used as a down payment to open my business. I have a stable income and a good number of customers. Oh, and I adopted a kitten from my ex-colleague before I left. She's a munchkin mix. I doted on her so much that she became a fat cat. She still looks adorable like that, but I think it's not good for her health. As a responsible owner, I reflect on this, and I'm on a diet with my cat. I am single, but I am never really alone. My life is colorful, surrounded by customers and a cat every day.